This is Wednesday, 13th of November. We're here in Bakersfield at the 7th Annual Kern County Energy Summit.
One other comment here, just to make sure I know where we're at. We're in Bakersfield, oil capital. I have a picture of a Nissan Leaf in my office. I hope nobody's taping this. But I drive a 3/4 ton Dodge pickup truck. I found that it's hard to haul horses with a Nissan Leaf. So with that, we'll just dive into this. I really had no idea what I was supposed to talk about when we got started. So I thought maybe the thing that we do is try to make this a little bit more local. We're a new member to the community. The MidAmerican Energy family of companies feels very fortunate to be able to be here in Kern County. So we'll give you a little bit of an introduction to the Energy Holdings Company and some of our subsidiaries, and we'll talk a little bit about 2 or 3 of the plants that we've got very briefly, focus on Solar Star, and then talk a little bit about what we're trying to do to earn your trust in the community here in the county as a good neighbor and community member. So if you kind of start from the top, MidAmerican Energy, I wish I had a pointer because these are a little difficult. But MidAmerican Energy Holdings Company is a holdings company. It's headquartered in Des Moines, Iowa. It's owned about 90% by Berkshire Hathaway and Mr. Buffett. Thank you. That was good. Owned about 90% by Berkshire Hathaway and Mr. Buffett. Mr. Walter Scott, who was the Chairman Emeritus of Peter Kiewit & Sons Construction. I'm sure many of you in the energy industry know Kiewit & Sons, or Kiewit Energy Group, but he is the second owner. And then Greg Abel, who is our Chief Executive Officer and Chairman, also owns a portion of the company. As a company, we have across both regulated and non-regulated platforms, we have about 24,000 megawatts of electricity generation. And I would note that today we have about 32% of that capacity is either with renewable or non-carbon resources. So we're well ahead of the curve on the top couple companies in the energy industry in terms of especially wind and renewables. Our Kern River group out of Salt Lake City is probably the largest seller of natural gas into the state of California. So we know the area very, very well. From a kind of a starting point, our companies all operate on 6 core principles. The business started 20 years ago with a couple of independent power producing assets and has been converted over the last 20 years into a very, very large privately held company, although we have regulated businesses. But our core principles are customer service, employee commitment, environmental respect, regulatory integrity, working with our regulators in all of our, where we have generating plants, operational excellence, financial strength. Environmental respect is what really caused the company a couple of years ago to take a look at what we could do to form a non-regulated business that could go out and compete in the wind, solar, geothermal, and hydro markets. So at this stage, the renewables business consists of geothermal, wind, solar, and hydro. Southern California Edison is our customer, been a great customer for us. Again, we work with CAISO. I will tell you that we have a tremendous relationship with our construction partner and our supplier, SunPower. In fact, I think I saw Nikki last night. Rob Dingy is here. They've done a great job for us, and we just look forward to continuing here over the next couple of years to get the plant built. But they've just been great partners for us. And I talked last night with Lorelei a little bit about kind of how the investment community looks at Kern County. It's an interesting kind of a thought process. We went out we went to the bond market like we normally do with these plants, and we thought about going out for $800 million. It takes about 4 or 5 months to go through a process like this. And we ended up being well oversubscribed. Our first tranche of debt that we placed at 5 3/8 was placed at $1 billion. And everybody thinks, well, that's because you're with Berkshire Hathaway. I would tell you that this is non-recourse project financing. So the bottom line is, if we don't do a good job out there at that power plant, Berkshire's not going to parachute in and help us. But that's a good signal of, I think, the work that you folks have done here in Kern County to kind of build a brand and an image. Lorelei talked about it last night. And the investment community all the way on the other side of the country here in New York and other places sees the same thing.
The United States for about $75,000 per person per year. On the vertical axis, it's how much oil people use. And there's a very strong link. We use a lot of oil in this country. Now you go to the bottom scale, and way down there, and almost tragically, you have countries like Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, that are $200 in a year per person. But the important thing here, this laser printer works, is this cluster right there. China, India, Mexico, Brazil, about 3 billion people. And when you look, you see there's an inflection point where the energy demand starts to go up dramatically. Sort of straight lines, and then it goes up. What happens at about $10,000 per person, which these countries are rapidly approaching, is you get the development of a middle class. When you develop a middle class, they want to drive. They like refrigerators. They want air conditioning. Energy demand goes up. Now, it's a tough statistic to come up with on an international basis, but probably 3 or 4% depletion per year. So if the whole industry stopped drilling, the oil supply would go down 3 or 4% a year as we produce it out. On the other hand, you get demand growing about 1.3%, which is sort of on the low side, but I think efficiency is going to come into play and keep it there. So you take that natural decline, you go out to 2020, the existing capacity will be 60, 70 million barrels. Worldwide demand will be 100 million barrels per day of production. That's 40 million barrels per day that the industry has to replace. The Bakken's doing great, we've heard stories. It'll make 1 or 2 million barrels a day, maybe 2.5. The industry has to replace 40 million barrels a day of production in the next 10 years. Needless to say, the industry is spending $200 billion plus a year, probably closer to 300 or 400 billion. And the cost structure, to get oil out of the Bakken and be profitable, you need $60, $70 oil to do it. Out there that are going to drive that, there's subsidies, but you'll see in the long run we'll need it. And then the second graph on the right shows that certain renewable sources are starting to become grid parity with, say, natural gas fired. Onshore wind is getting there, and within 10 years it will be right on parity. Solar is still somewhat expensive, but it certainly has its needs. We're going to install solar on our roof at home next spring. I mean, it's certainly a great adjunct supply. We have tons of rooftops. You look at here in the building, or in Kern County, tons of sun. It really has its place here. Some other forms out there, you can see the cost for coal, natural gas, pretty inexpensive, unless there's a carbon tax, then those will go up dramatically. So simply put, even with the doubling of renewable fuel, renewable alternative energy every 4 years, hydrocarbons are going to be an indispensable part of the world's energy supply for my lifetime. It's not going to change. And we may try to decarbonize California, but at the end, it's worldwide, it's going to make a big difference. It's there. We need it. Those of you who are interested in pursuing careers, I see a lot of you out there in oil and gas. It's going to be a very good career to pursue in your lifetimes. So here's sort of the energy mix. You see about 2020, 2030, there's a gap. We call it the energy tipping point. That's not my term, that's Goldman Sachs' point. They feel at that point the cost of energy due to the lack of supply is going to start to creep up, and it will have an impact on that worldwide growth. We call it the energy tipping point. They model a certain worldwide GDP growth, and they think about this time energy is going to start to crimp it. Promoting one form of energy over another is bad. California may get away with it, but on a worldwide basis, it's bad, because you're going to have a lot of geopolitical ramifications across the world if we go that route. California's policies, I discussed, seem designed to wean the state off of hydrocarbons. I don't think that's feasible or realistic in my lifetime or my children's lifetime. And the transition to renewable energy will definitely help, but in the end, we're going to need all forms of energy. So that first slide that showed the energy and oil is one I want you to remember. Here's the one I want you to remember, take away when you hear our politicians talk, and you see worldwide events. This is sort of a Venn diagram. And when you think of energy, think of three areas: the environment, energy security, economics. Call that the sweet spot. Clearly in California, we're out here. Energy security, the more we wean off oil and gas, the more our sources of energy are going to come from outside this state, other states, etc. And the economics, as we know, it's going to get pricier. Go to China. Energy security is their key. They want to have that energy for their people. Everything they do, they don't care about the environment. They do care about the economics. Go to Latin America. Gasoline in Venezuela is 5.8 cents a gallon. They subsidize it. Those countries with teeming poor, it's important that the governments there, economics, they got to keep those people happy. They don't want the revolutions which a lot of those countries have, and by raising fuel prices, you hear about the riots. Those countries are driven down here. Saudi Arabia is driven down here. They don't have to worry about energy security, environment, economics, keeping their peoples happy. So when you hear our politicians talk about policy, figure out where they are and realize if they start to pull one way or the other, it's going to impact. This is where you want to be. That's the sweet spot of the global energy dynamic. And just realize, as a world, where we stand, as California, where we stand, and I think Kern County can end up right there. So that's my speech. Are there any questions?
It's a 2.0 megawatt turbine, and you can just see the size scale difference there from that. And just take a look at what we call sort of the rotor swept area up there between the three blades, and you'll see that circle just is tremendously more efficient in harvesting the wind.
Technology. And for lithium-ion batteries, there's a projection is that prices will fall from a third of what they currently are by 2020. And that projection is based on not volume increases in manufacturing, is based on improvements in technology. So we don't have to build a bazillion batteries to be able to capture those gains.
So we have come a long way in the past 5 years, becoming this diversified energy economy. We've produced thousands of jobs and revenue for multiple government agencies, not just the county, but school districts, cities, special districts. And our statistics are pretty impressive here in Kern County when it comes to energy. We have over 8,142 megawatts of permitted solar and wind. And we are well on our way to 10,000. Two-thirds of that's in production. As I said, we've had thousands of jobs created, $40 million of property tax revenue for the renewable side. 80% of the oil in California comes from here, from Kern County, and there are billions of dollars in tax revenue that's been created. And the thing that I'm most proud of is that was all done with private investment money. The government didn't do that. In fact, what we did is we got out of the way. That was all done with private investment money. So the question now for all of us, after all of these great PowerPoints and all of these statistics, where do we go from here? So the business community is who is going to tell us where we go next. So what is government doing? What am I doing while I'm waiting for business to tell me where I'm going? Well, I have started a new line of inquiry, and it's regarding regulation. So here's my question. Why do we regulate business? That's the question that I've been working on in the past year. Why do we regulate, because I don't regulate everything, so why do we regulate land use and environmental issues related to business? It's a pretty interesting question, right? And I know that there are people here who have many detailed answers, and I also know that some of you want to jump up and say, stop, please. Okay, lot about fossil fuels this, and alternative energy that, and clean that. I'm really lucky that that is not my world. You know? I mean, I'm informed by that world, and I live in that world. There's 34 million cars, and every one of you have one or two of them in California. And that gasoline comes from California refineries. It doesn't come from someplace else. And we need to be clear that during this next 30-year or 40-year or whatever it is transition period, we need to continue to produce oil. We need to continue to be a leader in all the energy that we have in Kern County. So I have learned a few things in the past few years and in my career, and one of them is that investor confidence is what's important. And in California, it's not based on what Sacramento and Washington, D.C. does. It's also based on what we do here. Have we made businesses feel welcome? Are they clear on the rules and what's going to happen and how long it's going to take? Have we helped them find the best location in Kern County? Or have we also told them that maybe they're not a good fit for us? Sometimes the best thing you can do for a project is early and often tell people this is the wrong place for you. Don't invest $10, $20, $30 million in a project that at the end of the day is really not right for us. And the elected officials are going to say yes or no to that, not me. But it is one of the downsides of investing in California that people invest millions of dollars only to be told later, no.
As you know, in the summer of this past summer, we had an unexpected event in Southern California. Southern California Edison decided to close the San Onofre nuclear generating station, affectionately known as SONGS. 2,200 megawatts evaporates from the system. And not only that, there's a load pocket in San Diego, which really has been exacerbated by the absence of SONGS. So immediately we worked to get what's called synchronous condensers on 2 units at Huntington Beach, basic electric motors to keep voltage up. And now we have embarked on a program which we think we have a pretty good management on, of taking about half the resources needed in either preferred resources, which would be efficiency or renewables, and some transmission upgrades, and the remainder in conventional resources. And we're doing this in a way that if any part of that fails or is not achieving its goal, then we will move to be able to provide that gap with some other resource. And the good news is that I've had a 40-year career in energy in California. I have never seen state agencies work as well together as they are today. I spoke a couple of years ago before the Little Hoover Commission, which looks at efficiency in government. Not an oxymoron, by the way. They look at efficiency in government, and they recommended we create an energy agency, a big czar, and all that. To tell you the truth, I used to be in favor of that. I'm not. I've seen PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, California Energy Commission, the Air Resources Board, the ISO, the State Water Resources Control Board, and the Air Quality Management District in Southern California all work together to make sure we're coordinated, to make sure that whatever needs to be done gets done, because no one is going back to blackouts as we had in 2000 and 2001. I lived through that. We're not ever doing that. I had poor experience with that, but I don't want to ever relive that, and the governor doesn't want to do that. No one with common sense. So I think we will clearly be able to avoid that. Ultimately, this is going to be a distributed system. And I can tell you, I've talked to the strategic planning people at the utilities, most of them, and they trying to see the same thing. So just bear with me a moment. I want you to think about this. If you look at human history from the post-industrial age forward, you can look at a whole bunch of different sectors. And what I find, among a lot of things, what I find is most sectors of human activity was communication, transportation, entertainment, even medicine, shopping, whatever you want to call it, have gone from a centralized system to a dispersed or decentralized system. It's obvious in communications. I mean, some of you may be old enough to remember you used to have to go to an office or some place to make a phone call or send a telegram. You used to have to go to the railway station or the stagecoach line to travel anywhere. Today, that is completely dispersed. You know, virtually anyone can move around freely, and all of us can communicate with things like this. I mean, I watch baseball games on this thing. And, I think Bulldogs are doing great, by the way. I've been to Fresno when they're playing and the base is completely red. It's amazing. But if you think about that, in entertainment, it used to be you had to go to a play or you had to go to a movie house and you saw what they were putting on. You had no choice. Today, you have infinite choices on all kinds of devices. You can watch it in your car, your home, anywhere you want. And that has happened in almost every endeavor except two. It's probably more, at least two that I can think of. One is manufacturing. By and large, manufacturing is still done in a centralized place. Even the Tesla, which is an amazing vehicle, if you go online on YouTube and see how that's made, it's truly amazing. But it's still in an assembly line, centralized production facility. And electricity. Electricity is still, by and large, centralized. And both the major components here is that you not only go from central to decentral, you go from, you get it the way I make it, to you get it the way you want it. And that's customer choice is true in every one of the things I mentioned. It drives it. So what does that mean? Manufacturing is under a revolution right now, and you've only seen the beginnings of it, with 3D, or it's called the additive manufacturing, or 3D industrial printing. It is truly amazing. You may remember 3 years ago or so, the cover of The Economist magazine had a picture of a Stradivarius violin on the cover, printed on an industrial printer, 3D printer. It was perfect. I was holding in my hand about 2 months ago an intake, a metal intake manifold for a vehicle, printed on a printer. Biomedical parts are being printed. Prosthetics, even artificial ears and things like that are being printed on printers. It's going to dramatically change the way we make things. It has consequences for our ports, our import policy, it has consequences for labor. We haven't even begun to think about this yet. But it is going to disperse manufacturing. It's going to go to a distributed system. And electricity, now I'm talking, this is 30, 40 years, not tomorrow. Electricity ultimately, I think, and I think these are immutable trends, is going to move in that direction as well. I think ultimately customers will have distributed systems, we'll have storage, we'll have EV to grid, we'll have a whole lot of choices on their own personal structure. And it will largely be not disconnected from the grid, but the grid will primarily be for backup and for large customers.